You are listening to the Two and Out CFL podcast, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
And thanks for pressing play on this episode of Two and Out. It's Travis Currah and only Travis Currah today. It is after week 12 of the 2024 CFL season. Also the night after night 2 of Metallica at Commonwealth Stadium in Edmonton. It was my 18th Metallica show. Lucky enough to be in the Snake Pit, which is a pit in the center of the stage. Unprecedented access to fist bumps and guitar picks and all that sort of stuff. You might hear it in my voice, but man, a weekend of a lifetime. Sheldon Jones currently en route back to Regina, the long highway back to Regina after a Metallica weekend in Edmonton. It's gonna be no frills, just me and you talking football, recapping the weekend that was. I ended up just watching and staying unspoiled on the Alouettes Elks game, so we're going to get there, but I do want to start by just, saluting first responders. I know that sounds a bit weird for a football podcast, but over 2 weeks, we've had 4 players leave stadiums in ambulances, all for different reasons. And we saw it on Friday. Stanley Bryant, the veteran offensive lineman for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, looks like maybe heat exhaustion, hydration issues, trying to cool the guy down, getting him IVs on the field, and leaving the field on a stretcher. Jalen Acklin of the RedBlacks ends up getting hit low. He went high to make a catch, hit the ground hard, and it was a scary scene in Ottawa on Saturday. The ambulance comes and takes him off the field. Jalen's been on the show. He's just a great guy, a great receiver. And seeing these players go through some of this stuff. Last week, Luther Hakanavanu, Taylor Powell for the Ticats, both leaving Tim Hortons Field in an ambulance. Man, Metallica Friday night, there was a medical emergency on the floor, people leaving, on stretchers from the show as well. You get 55,000 people in an area, 29 degrees, not keeping up with your water intake. Things happen, and hey, these people are there to keep us safe and sometimes see us during the toughest moments. So salute to them, but keeping the players safe, keeping regular citizens safe, because there's been scary moments and it's been heavy watching some of these football games, man. I just hope these players, the ones that left the field, are recovering well. I saw Jalen Acklin. He's back home recovering with his girls. He says that on X. And Stanley Bryant, I guess, called his teammates from the hospital saying he's doing better and glad that the Bombers got the win. And hey, it's just tough to see these guys, and hopefully things, I guess, normalize, if you want to call it that, and we don't see any of these incidents the rest of the season or ever again. You never want to see it. But man, it's just been far too often, it feels like, over the last couple weeks. Week 12 started in Toronto, Saskatchewan's first visit to BMO Field since 2019, and that was the final score, 2019. The Riders were moving the ball very well early in the game. They started with a field goal, then they started with a touchdown, and then that's when the wheels, it seemed like, started to fall off for the Riders. The Argos offense, and Chad Kelly, I think he was working through some rust, and I guess that's the way it goes when you miss half the season and don't have a training camp. But 24 of 39, 322 yards and an interception for him. The difference is the Rider offense, after the success in the first quarter, just stalled. And interceptions are never ideal, obviously, for a football team, but the placement on the field that the Riders were turning the ball over, you just can't do. And this what makes the Argos so good, and it's what's made them so good over the past couple of years. If you make a mistake, you're going to pay for it. Trevor Harris goes 18 of 29, 2 interceptions and a touchdown. I think the first interception that he threw, the line of scrimmage was like on the 2. Well, the next play, Cameron Dukes punches it in for a touchdown. The next interception, it's inside, their 20-yard line, and Toronto turns that into a field goal. It's 13-10 Saskatchewan at halftime, and the 10 points from Toronto come from their offense really not having to do much work. And it could have been actually a lot worse for the Riders. They're blessed to lose by 1 point, I think. They stuffed Cameron Dukes on the goal line. They stuffed Kadeem Carey on the goal line. They broke up a 3rd and 2 play also on the goal line. That one to Richie Sindani. Like, the defense kept them in this. And then the clock management at the end of the game for the Riders. And hey, credit to the Argos for this, because it was Marcus Sayles that makes this interception. 2 minutes and 40 seconds left in the fourth quarter. Now, in the CFL, we know if it's inside 3 minutes and you get the ball, especially with close to 3 minutes to go, you're going to need a few first downs. Like, it's not even close to over. You can't just milk the clock. But what Saskatchewan did, they get the ball with 2:28. They punt it with 2:19. They killed 9 seconds. There was a 2-yard rush, a timeout Toronto, and then an incomplete pass to Sam Emelis. So unable to move the ball anymore in the fourth quarter. Toronto ties it up with the field goal. Sask gets the ball again. A minute to go. Trevor Harris gets sacked. Then there's an incomplete pass. They punt it right back to Toronto from their own end zone with play clock still having time, the time still counting down. And then, look, Toronto gets the ball back and ends up missing a field goal, but it goes through the end zone. So the single point wins the game for the Toronto Argonauts. There is that discussion. It comes up every time that something like this happens. What do you think about the single on a missed field goal? Should the rule be altered? I think the conversation is there. Maybe you could alter it. You know what I mean? If it goes through the back of the end zone and the returner doesn't have a chance to take it out of the end zone, yeah, maybe we can get rid of that. But the matter of the fact is, outside of the first quarter, Saskatchewan was unable to move the ball anymore, and the defense just kept them in it. Just tightening up on the goal line, stopping Toronto there multiple times, and the Argos totally deserved this one. Even though they couldn't get their running game going. That's really the bread and butter of this Argos team, and it has been to this point in the season. Kadeem Carey, 11 carries, 35 yards in this one. But I think what we saw with Chad Kelly being back for the Argos was that big playability. They hadn't had that anymore. And DeMonte Coxey, 5 catches, 112 yards. David Ungerer had 72 yards himself, and Mackay Polk had 55 yards. So now that big play threat is back for the Argos. The complementary football is there. If you turn the ball over, they're going to make you pay there. The Argos, 6-4, but that's only good for third in the East. Many other times that might have been first in the East at this point of the season. The Riders, first in the West at 5-1. The Bombers coming to town in Regina for Labor Day at 5-6, who have now moved back up to second place. This has been a wild season. It's almost unpredictable, but I look at the West. BC struggling now, obviously. Winnipeg struggled at the beginning of the year. They came back. Sask was good at the beginning of the year. Now they've started to falter a little bit. Edmonton struggled at the beginning of the year, and now they're contenders, at least to win any game that they're in. Every team in the West has just had a brutal stretch and a good stretch. Not really much consistency going on there. It's been a fun 2024 season so far. Frankie Hickson did get 16 carries, 79 yards there for the Riders. The leading receiver for the Riders, Sam Emelis, 8 catches, 66 yards on 12 targets. And Dante Myers continues to do all right. 3 catches, 61 yards for the Saskatchewan offense. But yeah, Trevor Harris, 190 yards, 18 of 29 with the 2 picks at brutal parts of the field. So the Riders prepare for Winnipeg coming to town for a Labor Day Classic showdown with a back-to-back battle. First place in the West Division is going to be decided, at least temporarily, with those 2 games. Friday Night Football ended up being the Winnipeg Blue Bombers beating the Hamilton Tiger Cats here 26-23. Now, I talked about the Argos taking advantage of the turnovers by Trevor Harris, 10 points on 2 interceptions. Well, the Ticats got 6 points on 3 interceptions that Zach Collaros threw, and then a costly fumble on a punt return that ended up getting returned for a touchdown by the Bombers. You're making your CFL debut. That was Jordan Bird, number 80 for the Ticats. Ooh, a tough debut. One of your first returns ends up getting returned for a touchdown. But this felt, and I don't know about you, it almost felt like the 2019 edition of the Bombers a little bit, where they set out to play physical. They set out to beat you up. Brady Oliveira, 18 carries, 120 yards. That's going to beat up any defense. I don't care who you are. If you're getting hit every single play, they're going to have to do that. And maybe part of that play calling was the Bombers they ended up being down, 2 linemen? It wasn't a pretty situation. They were getting into the depth guys there, losing Stanley Bryant early on in the game. That was, the first quarter kind of thing. So then when they start making those replacements, it is tough to protect your quarterback. It is tough to do anything else. So let's just beat up the Ticats, and that's what they did. But the Ticats forcing those 3 interceptions, I mean, is that the Chris Jones effect? They seemed faster to the ball. They seemed to be tackling a lot better than they had in previous weeks, at least I thought. But there aren't moral victories anymore, for the Ticats. When you're sitting at 2-9, close just isn't good enough. They're not going to win 7 in a row to get to 500 to wrap up this season. Bo Levi Mitchell, 14 of 28, 220 yards. I know he didn't turn the ball over, but they didn't have all that much success moving the ball against the Bombers. Greg Bell gets into the game again, 12 carries, 41 yards, but he did have the 2 touchdowns. Good for him. But among Ticat fans does seem to be there is some controversy surrounding James Butler. I've heard that he's been banged up since training camp and he's been working through it. Now they're giving him time off. But the injury report did say that James Butler was a healthy scratch last week. What's the truth? Are they lying on the injury report? I don't know. But hey, Greg Bell had a great game last week, and he gets another 2 touchdowns. Not the reason that they're losing, but it does make you think what's happening in Hamilton. Tim White, 7 catches, 134 yards. He's getting a lot of that yardage from Bo. He's getting more and more involved in that offense. I guess that is a positive if you want to take something away, but he had 103 yards more than the next closest receiver in Brendan O'Leary Orange. 2 catches, 31 yards for him. Leading receiver for the Bombers, Ontario Wilson, 6 catches, 72 yards. Kenny Lawler had the 2 catches for 17 yards. One was a touchdown, and that was the winning touchdown. And I'm thankful for that because I had Zach as my captain on fantasy, and I paired him with Lawler. They almost got me nothing, and until it was that last drive of the game. And you see what the Bombers did. They go 72 yards, 11 plays to take the lead with 19 seconds to go. Zach Collaros ends up hitting Kenny Lawler for that 10-yard touchdown that ended up being the game-winning touchdown, but just sticking with the run and not panicking. This is just what the Bombers do. This was not a pretty game. I think a lot sort of expected for the Bombers to crush the Ticats, but hey, it came to the last-minute win, a last-minute drive. But you look at that time of possession, almost 36 minutes controlling the ball for the Bombers, and that's with Zach throwing 3 interceptions. The Ticats just couldn't stay on the field. As simple as that. There was another command center moment, I thought, in the fourth quarter, where it looked like Brandon Alexander, in a bizarre turn of events, intercepted the ball. And I thought that play, yeah, I get the inconclusive thing, but keeping the completion, I thought that was strange. And it didn't affect, the final result of the game at all, but it sure didn't look like the receiver had control of that ball at almost any point of the catch. So I think I would have rather seen it go incomplete than be a Ticat reception. So that helped the Ticats with some field position, but wasn't enough for them to win the game. The Bombers only had the 1 sack. It was Nick Hallett there on that one. Willie Jefferson does what he does, gets a knockdown, and Terrell Bonds ends up getting 2 knockdowns in this one. But the Ticats were getting to Zach. 3 interceptions, 3 sacks as well. Nick Usher getting 2 of them, and David Menard getting another one. Going to Saturday, where the BC Lions have now lost 5 games in a row. They are under 500, and it does feel like there's some panic setting in among fans on the West Coast. It's a Grey Cup hosting year. I get it. I'm down with the panic. The RedBlacks winning here, though, 34-27. It's a tough assignment going to Ottawa. Those guys get paid too. There's a reason that they're 7-2-1, and they are second in the East. There's no reason that BC fans or BC themselves thought they were going to go to Ottawa and have a cakewalk here, and they didn't. But it did look like early in the game, Nathan Rourke was commanding the offense, and he was moving the ball well. Like that first drive, 6 plays, 69 yards, a touchdown to David Mackey, and look, the Lions were off to the races here. The RedBlacks answer back with a field goal, but in a little bit here, the Lions have a 10-3 lead, continuing to move the ball. Next play, though, or the next drive for the Lions, field goal blocked. Sean White's long field goal streak coming to an end, and the stat sheet did say Brandon Dandridge got the hand on it. Many thought it was Javan Santos-Knox, but Dandridge, I think he came around the corner. He got the hand on it. And then, I don't know, maybe that one was the change of fortunes a little bit here, because the RedBlacks get the ball, but they end up punting. And BC takes a penalty on that punt return. So they start the drive at their own 10-yard line. Rourke gets picked off on the next play, and then the ensuing possession after that, the RedBlacks get a touchdown to Jalen Acklin, and they're right back in it, trailing 11-9. BC continued to move the ball, and while Rourke didn't throw any more interceptions, that defensive line for Ottawa was getting through to him, and making life difficult. They ended up forcing 2 fumbles, recovering both of those fumbles, and those fumbles were massive with getting this big win against BC for the Ottawa RedBlacks. Michael Wayfield and Kenny Onyeka both recovering those fumbles and taking over from BC deep in their territory. And I mean, for BC, just the fact they can't pressure the quarterback. Like Drew Brown, a lot of times back there, he did throw an interception in this one. He had all the time in the world. 28 of 37, 393 yards, 3 touchdowns. And there were a couple moments in this game where Ottawa got called for offensive pass interference. And hey, if those stand, I mean, they were pretty clear penalties. Drew Brown's pushing 450 in this one, and there was just no pressure from the BC Lions defensive front. Of course, Drew Brown's going to be able to pick apart any defense if that is going to continue being the problem for the Lions. But it was the beginning of the fourth quarter, and I think that was the defining moment for the RedBlacks. They had a 3-point lead at that point. They start the quarter with the ball. Well, actually, they had the ball for the last play of the third quarter as well. So they end up getting a touchdown there. Dustin Crum, the 1-yard rush from the 1. 16 plays, 70 yards, 9:27 off the clock. Whoa. That will beat up anybody. Sometimes maybe your best defense is a great offense that stays on the field. And if you're keeping the ball out of Rourke's hands, well, how's he going to get anything done? That's the bottom line. The Lions defense could not get off the field in this one. Rock Armstead for the RedBlacks gets 15 carries and 52 yards. Their leading receiver was Justin Hardy. Man, they were looking his way a lot. 11 catches on 12 targets, 114 yards. And then Nick Mardner. How about the performance from the rookie? 3 catches, 95 yards, 2 touchdowns. What a game from big number 84. William Stanback continues his nice stretch here. 15 carries, 99 yards for him. So over 6 yards a carry for William Stanback. And then Justin McInnes was the leading receiver for the BC Lions. 5 catches, 79 yards. If you are deciding the starting quarterback for the BC Lions going into Touchdown Pacific, what do? It's a back-to-back with the Ottawa RedBlacks. You have to think that if VA is healthy, then maybe that gives you a little bit of a wrinkle to throw Ottawa's way in a back-to-back. But hey, Nathan Rourke is born in Victoria. What an opportunity to start in his hometown in a non-traditional CFL city. There's some interesting, I think, wheels in motion to decide the starting quarterback for this one. Or do you just want to go and keep going with the flow? Rourke, more reps in practice, more reps with the receivers, the offense, and let him start the game. They did say that, Vernon Adams Jr., when they signed Rourke, did not have his last start of the year. So, is it this week? Can they figure out getting them both on the roster, both into the game? I'm not so sure about that. But if the losses continue, the questions will continue to come as well. The last game of Week 12 was the Edmonton Elks going to Montreal and giving the champs a run for their money. 21-17, the final score as the Montreal Alouettes win. And the story in this one really was just what happened when the teams came out of the tunnel after halftime. Man, the Elks get shut out in the second half. The Owls scored 2 touchdowns in the third quarter. They miss the 2-point conversions, but that was it. That gave them the lead. They kick a field goal in the fourth quarter and win the game. But the Elks, they had these opportunities. And now they went with Kevin Brown back on the roster. And they rotated him with Justin Rankin. Now, early in this game, they kind of were giving a running back series for series. And I noticed that Kevin Brown was having more success. He had a couple big runs. He had 16 carries, 105 yards. Good for Kevin Brown, number 4, to get in there and chalk up some yards in there. But Justin Rankin struggled more in this one. 6 carries, 19 yards. As the game went on, obviously Montreal adjusted. They shut down the run, but KB, he even had a big run in the second half as well. McLeod Bethel-Thompson, 21 of 33, 2 touchdowns, and then in the second half, Montreal turning on the pressure. And you saw the 2 touchdowns from the Elks, one to Geno Lewis, one to Curly Gittens. Very similar routes, but the Owls adjusted how they were playing those routes in the second half. They almost picked one off, but they just stalled with that Elks offense. There was a moment in the third quarter where the Elks had 112 rushing yards in the first half and then 12 in the second half. But you want to talk about third quarters. Cole Speaker, 5 catches, 107 yards, and 2 touchdowns, all in one quarter, as the Alouettes were honoring their 1974 Grey Cup team. Sonny Wade in attendance, Wally Buono in attendance. What a great team it was, winning the Grey Cup over the BC Lions in 1974. Cody Fajardo back in there, looking mobile, coming off the hamstring injury. And if he came back a couple weeks ago, he's probably not making some of the runs that he did. 22 of 34, 2 touchdowns, and an interception in this one. And the Elks getting into some penalty trouble. Especially there was a moment in the second half when Cody Fajardo went to run out of bounds, and look what Kai Gray did. Basically hit him as he was out of bounds. He didn't need to take the hit, but that was on the drive that the Alouettes ended up taking the lead on. They will take a free 50. Yeah, they'll take a free few yards here. Now, the thing is, Edmonton got lucky because Montreal also took a holding on that play, so they only got the net gain, but an automatic first down for the Montreal Alouettes. Just an unnecessary penalty that Edmonton took there. 9 plays, 83 yards, and that is where the Alouettes took the lead and never gave it up again. Late in the game. We got to talk kickers again. I like talking about kickers when they're doing well, but when they're not doing well, not the best. I don't know if this was the difference in the game for the Edmonton Elks, but Boris Beattie ends up missing a 41-yard field goal with 9 minutes to go. And at that point, it would have made it 21-20 Alouettes lead with 5 minutes to go at that point in the game. But after that, the Elks shut down the Alouettes. And the Elks actually made it to the Montreal 12-yard line. And the fact they were down by 4, they thought, well, we better go for it on third down here. If they would have made the field goal previously, they probably would have kicked the field goal and then taken a 2-point lead. That being said, then the next drive would have been completely different. Right? because Montreal ends up getting the ball on their own 6 after taking over on downs. They punt from their own end zone. So Edmonton had another opportunity to score a game-winning touchdown. They make it to Montreal's 19-yard line, and it's incomplete in the end zone, so the Alouettes hang on. But that missed field goal, that changed the whole dynamic of the last 5 minutes of the game, because the Elks were forced, at least in their minds, to go for 6s instead of 3s. A critical missed field goal from Boris Beatty in this one. But that just shows you this Alouette team, the adjustments that they can make mid-game at halftime. It changed the course of the second half, and they shut out the Elks in the second half. Leading receiver for the Edmonton Elks was actually Tevin Jones, 67 yards on 5 catches. He came out of the roster a few weeks ago. Man, he's been great. He's been producing for the team. For the Alouettes, it was Cole Speaker, and he did it all in the third quarter. Walter Fletcher, 11 carries and 54 yards for him. He also had 6 catches and 45 yards. The return of Austin Mack brought him 3 catches and 32 yards. If we look at the defense for the Alouettes, Jeffrey Canton-Arcou, 2 sacks for the rookie. This guy's misdirection and disguise getting to the quarterback is very, very impressive. 2 sacks for the Elks as well. Elliott Brown and Noah Taylor. But hey, that interception by Devondrick Bynum was a big one for the Elks. And also the review, they called back the other one. I think it was Darius Bratton. They thought that maybe he had an interception. The review showed that he didn't have the interception. So the command center, hey, they got that one right. The Alouettes moved to not 10-1 on the season, while the Elks fall to 3-8 as they prepare for a back-to-back with the Calgary Stampeders, which means Labor Day weekend is next. There's no Thursday nighter, there's no Friday nighter. It's all about Labor Day weekend. Touchdown Pacific Saturday on the island. The BC Lions and the Ottawa RedBlacks. The Riders and the Bombers in Regina on Sunday. And then the doubleheader, the Ticats, the Argos on Monday, and then the Stamps home to the Elks at McMahon Stadium. You can rate, review, and subscribe to 2 and Out on your favorite podcatcher, and check us out on YouTube as well. The merch shop is linked up there. You can do a super thanks. You can support the show on Patreon as well. Find all the links for this stuff at 2andout.ca. Sheldon Jones will be back on Wednesday. We will get you ready for Week 13, Labor Day weekend in the CFL. Take care of yourself and each other. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.